Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. It is Wednesday night, November 13th, and we just got through week 11. We're heading into week 12 of the college football season. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We got the SEC title race. A lot of the college football rankings, or the second week of the college football rankings, came out. So we've got a ton of scenarios to talk about in the SEC title race. And we've got a lot to catch up on from some crazy games last week. Before we get into it, though, make sure to follow us on all platforms. You can find us at Biscuits and SEC. Make sure to go to YouTube and you can search us Biscuits and SEC. Our tag is also at Biscuits and SEC. They're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to our channel. We're trying to grow that. And then you can also hit that notification bell so you never miss a show. We're live every Wednesday night at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, and then we're also live here in a little over an hour for SEC After Dark, which is at 9 Eastern, 8 Central as well every Wednesday night. So glad you guys could join us tonight. We appreciate you being here. Make sure also to sign up for our Biscuits and SEC newsletter. As you can see down here, that's on Mondays and Fridays. I write it on Monday. Hammer writes it on Friday. Gets you caught up on all the news around the SEC, from SEC football, SEC basketball, and then also SEC baseball when it's SEC baseball season. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We can get into it. Hammer, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Excited to get into some stuff we saw in week 11, talk about a little bit of, as we're closing out the season, some college football playoff, SEC title stuff, and ultimately week 12 with some very big matchups coming up this weekend, especially down in Athens. So excited to hop in.
Definitely. All right, well, let's get right to it then. So we can start off here with our week 11, just touch on some of these games that we saw last week, which it was another fascinating weekend of the SEC. I was going on history last week. We can start in Oxford with the biggest game that we saw, aside from Alabama, LSU. But, historically, Georgia has kind of whipped Ole Miss when they've played them. And they haven't had a ton of matchups in the past. But last week I picked Georgia just based on the history, knowing that Georgia's Georgia. They got 5 stars all over the field, even though it hasn't necessarily come together this year as much as you would have liked to see, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I just felt like with Georgia's defense, and at some point they're, even if they have one turnover for Carson Beck, whatever, that Georgia was going to be able to get the job done. And I thought the rain actually helped Georgia. However, that wasn't the case at all. So give us your thoughts on that game and what you saw.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, coming into the game, I think I picked Georgia. I know I picked them to win. I can't remember. I'm sure I picked them to cover too. It was a close line. And really, my only reasoning was just like, I gotta see it from Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin in a big game against a top 5 opponent. Because, of course, matchup wise, it looked like a tough matchup for Georgia, especially the way their offense was playing. But again, I just felt like I had to see it. And we really saw it from Ole Miss. I mean, game couldn't have started worse, right? First drive for Ole Miss of the game, Jackson Dart throws a pick, goes into the locker room, and Georgia gets the ball. I think it was like a 5 or 6, 7 play, 20-yard drive, right? So Ole Miss almost hands them their first touchdown of the game, and you're thinking, all right, here we go again. And then from that point forward, Ole Miss outscores them 28-3, beat them up physically up front, especially that Ole Miss front 7, just took it to Georgia's offensive line. They couldn't get anything going on the ground. And as Carson Beck has continued to show us this year, he's A, turnover prone, but B, without a running game, he is not the type of a guy, at least in this current Georgia offense, the way it's constructed, the weapons he has, he is not the type of a quarterback as it stands right now who's going to be able to lift up a team and sort of put a team on his back on the road in the rain with no running game to speak of. And Georgia got nothing the rest of the game. And, for the Ole Miss offense, they did more than enough to win, clearly. I think putting up 28 points against Georgia is never a bad game. Again, especially in the rain, I think Ole Miss did more than enough on offense. I didn't come away thinking, that they are the best offense in the country, but I didn't think that going into the game either. So Jackson Dart showed a ton of toughness. They had a very good, sound game plan going into it. And, I'm interested to see, I've seen this floating around a little bit, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on it, after this game. Like, Ole Miss, we'll get into the playoff rankings later. They're obviously back in the picture with just the 2 losses. Still need to win out, of course, but that was the biggest hurdle left was Georgia. But like, national title, how far can this Ole Miss team go? Because again, to me, this was such a statement game of not just you beat Georgia at home in the rain. It's you kind of dominated Georgia at home in the rain, right? What we've seen from Ole Miss in the past, especially against a team like Georgia or Alabama, is when they get into that big game, they look outclassed. The Kiffin offense doesn't work against a team that has those guys on defense. They are the ones that have been getting beat up in the trenches, and that totally flipped today. So I'm just curious, what do you think? Who wants to play Ole Miss right now is maybe a better question, and obviously that'll all play out. But I'm very curious because I think it's on the table for them as much this year as it's ever been, especially with no real dominant team out there.
Yeah, well, let's. We can look here quickly just at the Ole Miss schedule. So you've got just those blemishes right there, right? Like Kentucky, it's still, how did this team lose to Kentucky? It just makes no sense to me, as you've seen too from Kentucky the rest of this year, how they've played. It makes no sense. LSU, that's an understandable loss. LSU just got blown out, as we saw by Alabama, and they got, they got punched in the mouth by A&M. But the LSU is still a good team, so that's not a bad loss there. But that's what just, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like that's why you play the games, right? That's the old adage. That's why you play the games, because Ole Miss has Lane Kiffin, and he mentioned this, I think, in his press conference last week ahead of the Georgia game, is that Ole Miss going into this offseason, he realized last year in the Georgia game that they needed to recruit, they needed to do things differently in the transfer portal in order to get a caliber of player that could go up against a Georgia, that could go up against an Alabama. Because you're right, those teams typically manhandled them in the trenches, and they might have all the weapons on the outside. They might have a really good quarterback, but in the SEC, those things don't matter if they can get neutralized by a great defensive line, or on the opposite side, an offensive line who can just power through and just play ball control and just run it down the field, run it down your throat, hit a couple shot plays, game's over. And that's how they would lose those games. So it's frustrating that they lost those couple early in the year. However, they're peaking at the right time. And this is also the right year to have 2 losses and to be able to peak at the right time. Because if this was a couple years ago, we all know that with 2 losses, Ole Miss we wouldn't be talking about them for the national title,
right,
or even the 14 playoff. So they've got 2 losses. They're peaking at the right time. You have to love where Lane Kiffin has this team at, and the fact that he was able to keep them together, to keep that locker room together after those 2 early losses. And that was the main thing that I took away from this, is that, Ole Miss had, I think it was 5 sacks and 9 tackles for loss in this game. They had 133 rushing yards. Georgia had 60 rushing yards. Like, Ole Miss owned them in the trenches.
Yeah.
I don't think that Ole Miss has been able to say that for 80 years. There's maybe a couple games in like 80 years that they can say that they have owned a team like a Georgia in the trenches. So Lane Kiffin, what he's done on the defensive line and on that offensive line, the offensive line can be shaky at times, but they did their job in this one. Ole Miss had 133 rushing yards and protected Jackson Dart well for the most part, except for that injury early on. But that was the big thing I took away from this game. Ole Miss owned Georgia in the trenches, which is a massive headline.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, we can get more into, playoff stuff later when we talk about where Ole Miss sits, but obviously monumental win for Kiffin, that program, Dart in his 3rd year starting, to take out a team like Georgia when their backs have been against the wall, for weeks now, like you said, losing those 2 games earlier in the year. So credit to them for staying the course. And they, like I said, They look like a team right now to me that, it's the exact type of a team that people would talk about in the 12-team playoff era where, and they didn't necessarily think it'd be Ole Miss, I don't think, but, people would say you don't want to give those teams in the SEC especially, but even, you could put Ohio State or somebody in here, but like a very, very talented, good team, mulligans, because Ole Miss lost 2 games in the old format. They'd be done. They are no longer done. And they just, like you said, whipped what historically, or at least especially under Kirby Smart, has been a team that doesn't get beat in the trenches ever. And they beat them soundly. So very impressive stuff.
Yeah, it definitely was. Okay, we can move on to our next game, which was a shocking beatdown in Baton Rouge that Alabama absolutely laid the wood to LSU and their live Tiger mascot on the sideline. 42-13 was the final in that game. It was basically done at halftime. By early in the fourth quarter, Tiger Stadium was essentially empty. I was surprised. I thought that this was going to be a close game. I think I picked LSU. My picks last week were terrible. so don't hold that against me, chat. But yeah, it was an impressive game. And once again, LSU cannot stop a running quarterback. Blake Baker, I thought they were going to figure that out. I thought they were going to try to force Jalen Milroe to throw. Didn't matter. Jalen Milroe ran all over those guys. So what did you take away from this one?
Yeah, exactly what you said. I mean, I said coming into that game, the thing I was worried about with that quarterback run, bye week leading into that game or not, what I saw from LSU in the second half against A&M when they inserted Marcel Reed, I just didn't understand it, because the zone read and a running quarterback is not a new concept in college football. You don't necessarily have to prepare for it each week, but you are going to play multiple teams, regardless of what conference you play in, per season, that have a running quarterback and present that style of offensive scheme. And the fact that they couldn't stop it against A&M really worried me, to where I think I said last week, I don't know if they have the personnel, right? And like I've said on here before, you and I, we are not breaking down the all 22. We're not coaches. But that's the only thing I can think of, because Blake Baker is a good defensive coordinator, and LSU's defense is improved over, last year. So he's done some good things, but the fact that they can't stop the quarterback run, to me, just screams, for whatever reason, like I said, I don't know what the personnel is, what the issues are, but they don't have it, or they've got no buy-in from the team, and they're just not playing sound football. I'm sure it's a combination of perhaps all of that, but really, really shocking stuff, because Jalen Milroe ran the ball 12 times for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, it wasn't even like he ran the ball effectively. I mean, he outrushed LSU by himself on 12 carries by a wide margin, which is truly unbelievable when you think in the grand scheme of things, LSU football, right? I know since 2019, or, their defenses have not been as good, but I just credit to Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe, and Alabama for going in there, shutting the crowd up early, and just doing what they knew they could do and run the football with Milroe. For Brian Kelly and that staff, I mean, look, I don't know we're in year 3. He hasn't been able to figure out a defense at all. And I know they're recruiting well, but I don't know. Obviously, he's done plenty. I'm worried that what we are seeing from Brian Kelly is, he's a good coach. He wins ball games. He's won everywhere he's been. All that is true. But the knock on him at Notre Dame is he couldn't win the big games. And he's kind of doing the same thing at LSU. He's won a few big games. He's lost some, not even what many would consider to be big games. It seems like to me, he's taken not necessarily the same teams, the same style of team he had at Notre Dame, but the teams with the same ceiling, right? Where a Notre Dame team was going to win under Brian Kelly 10 or 11 games consistently and then get beat when it mattered most. This LSU team seems like, all right, we can count on them for 9 or 10 wins, but when it really comes down to it, can they get it done against the big boys? And so far, I don't think that they can.
Yeah, so far they haven't been able to do that. Like you said, they have a couple big wins, under their belt under Brian Kelly, but for the most part, when it comes to the big games, he cannot get it done. And I don't think that LSU fans are starting to rumble. They're starting to get frustrated with this. Like, this is not what we expected when Brian Kelly came in here. Like, we're LSU, sure. We want to win 10 games. We want to win 11 games, but we want to win national championships. That's what we do here in Baton Rouge is we win national championships. So if you're not going to do that, then be gone. And so we're starting to see a lot of that, from the LSU fan base.
And it's how you lose too, right? I mean,
True.
If they had kept it close in Kyle Field against A&M, by the way, the second time under Brian Kelly they've lost in Kyle Field at A&M by more than, by double digits, by over 2 scores. Mm-hmm. And then they get blown out by Alabama. They lose the first game of the season every year. It's just, there's a very big difference, and we've talked about this, of course, but like going 10-2 and losing 2 games by a field goal is very different than going 10-2 and losing to Alabama, the team that, the program that you are measured against as LSU, and getting blown out by them in Tiger Stadium at night so bad that your coach is crying to the referees that Bama is still blitzing when they are. I mean, Brian Kelly had his starters in. It's 42-6 with under a minute left in the fourth quarter. Garrett Nussmeier, the whole starting cast from LSU is out there.
And Bama's he's making it rain.
Right.
He's throwing the ball all over the field.
I know. Bama's got their third string defenders in there, and Brian Kelly's screaming that they're still blitzing. I mean, I don't know. Like you said, they're starting to rumble down there, as they should. Kelly's buyout is huge. He's not on the hot seat. It's just, if I was an LSU fan, I would be worried that everything that I heard about him from Notre Dame fans is coming to fruition in that, okay, yeah, the floor is very high under Brian Kelly, but the ceiling also seems to be at the very least lower than what LSU wants and expects. And I know we can look, a little bit at what LSU has left. That was their hardest game remaining, but I don't know, at Florida, we'll talk about that later. Vanderbilt's not a pushover. Oklahoma's not any good, but it's on the road. I mean, we'll see. And even then, best case scenario, they are 9-3, which is a very average season, I think, by LSU fans and, program standards.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what continues to happen. I think that LSU fans shouldn't give up just yet on Blake Baker. Let him get some guys in from this recruiting class. Let him get some guys in from the transfer portal this year. I think Blake Baker's a darn good coach. I think he's done a good job. Well, maybe not a good job, but he's done a decent job of improving LSU's defense year over year. But I think if you give him a little bit of time, I think Blake Baker is going to get it right.
I would tend to agree. My only hesitation there is I don't know what they're doing on defense with their personnel. Scheme, again, all that, whatever. But they really didn't get anybody in the transfer portal. The recruiting's been just kind of meh on that side. I mean, how many years in a row is Kelly going to say, whether it's the secondary from last year, right? It's like, hey, well, we got a bunch of freshmen out there or transfers that didn't pan out. Okay. Secondary is a little bit improved. Well, guess what? This year you can't stop the run. Well, you didn't get anybody in the transfer portal of note on defense. Look, a couple 100 miles up the road in Oxford. Look what they did on defense in the transfer portal, and they just beat the tar out of Georgia. You're LSU. Why, you can't do that? You couldn't have got Walter Nolan. You couldn't have got Jared Ivey, Prince Umanmielen. Like, I just don't know what he's doing. That's my worry.
That's fair. And that's kind of why I say just like wait and see with Blake Baker, because this is year one of Blake Baker. He came into the offseason. Maybe next, I think coming into this offseason, there's going to be a real sea change, like a serious change in philosophy, or at least it's going to be Blake Baker's direction, right? Like Blake Baker's going to have a lot of reign to go after and do what he wants to do within the transfer portal and obviously on the recruiting trail, recruiting throughout the season. So I would just I get it, LSU fans. I would be mad too. However, I do think just like take a deep breath here and let's see what it looks like next year. You should have. I think Nuss comes back next year, right? Nuss comes back. So. Anyway, sorry to start talking about next year already, LSU fans, but it's hard not to when Tiger Stadium is empty in the start of the fourth quarter, and Kirk Herbstreit's talking about it and saying that he's never seen Tiger Stadium look like this, and he's been covering college football for 20 years, 30 years now.
Yeah.
So, pretty wild, but okay, we can move on to the rest of the games here. An interesting one was South Carolina and Vanderbilt. So South Carolina whooped up on Vandy. It was a small spread. I want to say like 2.5 or 3 points for South Carolina going into Nashville, but the Gamecocks went in there and they took care of business. They held Vanderbilt to 7 points, get a win by 3 touchdowns. South Carolina, they really seem like they're coming on. And again, we've touched on it in weeks previous, but if they didn't have the loss to Alabama and the loss to LSU, which they lost, I think combined those games, they lost by 5 points, then South Carolina could easily only have one loss. Mm-hmm. Like this is a really good football team. And they're like Ole Miss that we talked about earlier in the show. They're starting to ascend. They're playing their best football at the end of the year. So what did you take away from Nashville?
Yeah, I know we talked a lot about those first 2 games, so I'll keep this fairly brief as we move along here through the rest of these games. But from Nashville, and real quick, I do want to point out, we mentioned it last week. Most of y'all watching this probably know, but that LSU loss for South Carolina, disregarding the pick 6 blindside block, they were winning 17-0. Lenore Sellers got hurt and did not return in that game. If he doesn't go to, get injured, I think they win irregardless of the pick 6 call. So tough break for the Gamecocks there, but give credit to Shane Beamer. That team is just, they're rolling right now. And my biggest takeaway here was I'm not surprised really in what South Carolina did defensively to Vandy. I just thought it was a bad matchup, right? You have a defensive line like South Carolina that's just an absolute wrecking crew. Vanderbilt's offense is interesting, and if you don't play sound defensively and you're not gap sound or you're flying up field, they can make you pay. But if you just kind of keep things in front and shed your blocks, they're not going to beat you over the top, right? Pavia is not going to throw for 400 yards. So I thought it was a tough matchup. That proved to be true. And then on the South Carolina offense, just you got to give them credit. I was tooting the horn basically the entire first 2 months of the season that this offense stinks. Their offensive line's not any good. Sellers is very hit or miss, and I just thought they stunk. Statistically, they did until the last couple of weeks, but I think they figured something out in the bye week. Rocket Sanders looks healthy. He had another over 100 yards, a touchdown on the ground. He had 52 yards and a touchdown receiving. He has been on fire his last 2 games, and Sellers has looked really well too, or really good too. So I think they got healthy during the bye week, and it seems like they figured some things out. So give that coaching staff credit for continuing to plug away and figure things out, figure out what they're good at, and just keep doing that.
Yeah, without a doubt. We can just check out South Carolina's remaining schedule here. They got a game coming up this weekend against Mizzou, which is going to be interesting. We'll touch on that one a little bit later. And then, you got Wofford. Obviously, that's a win. And you've got Clemson, which is a very winnable game at this point. You look at the way that Clemson's playing, like very winnable. So this team, they could end up Mizzou's a winnable game. Like they could easily end up 9-3, 8-4. And if they do that, like Shane Beamer has done a hell of a job. If you look at where people were expecting South Carolina to be at the start of this year, picking preseason. So it was a great win for South Carolina, and I think it's I just continue to be impressed by Shane Beamer and his resiliency, because a lot of people left him for dead. A lot of people have thought he's on the chopping block, just give it a little bit of time, and he's not at this point. Like he's one of the better coaches, I would say, in the SEC. He's in the top half of the coaches in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. Look no further than just South Carolina's historical record. A lot of football left to be played, but if he could get to 9 wins, I don't know when the last time they got there was off the top of my head, but I'm sure it was under Spurrier, and he was probably the first coach to win 9 games since maybe ever. I mean, they don't have a storied history. So if he could get to 9-3 in the SEC, that would be phenomenal.
I would think it probably would have been like 2013 when they came into the 2014 season ranked, in the top 10 and fell apart. So it's been a long time since it's been, with a 9-win season in your sights. It's been a long time since that's been the case in Columbia.
Yep.
Okay, so 2 final games to touch on before we move on to our next segment. First one to touch on, I would say the more interesting of the two, in my opinion, is the Mizzou-Oklahoma game, which was an absolute, just like a fun house. The last 5 minutes of that game, I think it was like the last 6 or 7 drives or something, were just absolutely crazy. You had the teams trading touchdowns. Then you had the teams trading scoop and score touchdowns. And there was another touchdown sandwiched in there somewhere too. So absolutely wild finish. I was watching another game, and I looked at the bottom line and saw that Oklahoma was winning with not much time left in the game, and thought, oh, okay, I picked Oklahoma to win. So I was like, all right, that pick's gonna hit. And then I looked up again, and Missouri was winning. And I was like, what on earth happened? So I flipped it to that game, and as soon as I flipped it, I saw Mizzou had a scoop and score touchdown with 30 seconds left, essentially to win the game. But then Oklahoma even had another chance and didn't get a targeting call that I thought absolutely should have been called. I could not believe it. It was helmet-to-helmet contact. Crown of the helmet was down. No flag. SEC officiating continues to be absurd, but insane game. And then the last thing, I think you can touch on this too, but Eli Drinkwitz, after the game, is being interviewed by Cole Kubelik and says that, Mizzou is still in the playoff hunt. And that's right, I said it, playoffs. It's like, all right, I get it. We're 7-2 here now after this win, but get out of here, man. Come on.
Yeah. In terms of the game, I honestly don't have a ton of takeaways other than, like you said, very entertaining, just a fun football game to watch, especially the way it ended. I do need to, similar to, eating some crow perhaps on the South Carolina offense, I owe Drew Pine an apology. I thought with him starting, they had no chance, even though I don't think very highly of Oklahoma. I just thought this guy's looked terrible. He looked terrible against Alabama. I don't think Missouri's very good, even with Brady Cook. So with Drew Pine, I thought they had no chance. And he didn't have a great game, but look, he goes 14 of 27, 143 yards, 3 touchdowns. So shout out to Drew Pine for, proving haters like myself wrong. And Drinkwitz said as much in the post game. That's one thing I will say, to get to Drinkwitz, he's hilarious to me. The stuff that he says, whether it's a post game interview, post game press conference, when he went in there after he beat Dan Mullen and he put his hood up or whatever, said, "May the force be with you." I mean, he's a funny guy. He's interesting. I like having him in the SEC. I think he's a very good coach. I think it's hard to say after the year that Missouri had last year that they have overachieved. But to be honest with you, like watching the team play this year, to have them sitting at 7-2 feels like they have overachieved, because I just don't think they're that good, but they keep winning. So he's doing some really good things there to win with a backup. I know Oklahoma's not good. We can get to them. They're not going to make a bowl game. Oklahoma, that is. They're 5-5 now with LSU and Alabama, and then LSU on deck. So Brent Venables has got a lot going on. But for Missouri, heck of a win, a good win at home at night, and they just found a way to win. And you got to give a team credit that is scrappy, keeps fighting. Playoffs, no, they lost. Look, we're about to find out because they're going on the road to South Carolina. They've only played 2 conference road games so far this year, at Alabama, at A&M, and they lost by a combined 65 points. So I don't think the playoffs are actually on the table for them. But if you're 10-2 in the SEC, crazier things have happened. Make the committee say no, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I just looked at the schedule there, right? I mean, winnable games. Like, should they be close? Like, are you way better than all of those teams? No. South Carolina absolutely could beat you. Arkansas could get you too.
Sure.
But you could also beat them too. Those are coin flip games. So if you take all three of those games, you're sitting at 10-2. If this team is sitting at 10-2 at the end of the year, this is the best job that Eli Drinkwitz has done by far in his time in Columbia. That team last year was much more talented, especially on defense. So, it's impressive that he's got them sitting at 7-2. The final thing I'll say on it is that I loved. I'm a Conor McGregor fan. I'll say it. I like Conor McGregor. I like some of the motivational stuff that some of the videos that have come out about his mindset. So I've always been a fan of his. So Drew Pine broke out the Conor McGregor swagger walk, and he said after in the post game that he was watching Conor McGregor like pump up videos and motivational videos and some of his fights leading up to the game to get him pumped up. So he said that's where it came from. So shout out to Drew Pine on that one. That was great. All right, so we could touch on this one quickly. We're doing decent on time tonight. So Tennessee and Mississippi State. Just quickly on that one, I didn't have a whole lot of takeaways from it. It went as I expected pretty much. The only big thing to note is something we can touch on later when we go over the Tennessee-Georgia game is Nico. Nico went down with an injury in the second quarter, didn't return after halftime, and looks like he's going to play this week, but we'll see. But either way, Dylan Sampson had a great game, and Mississippi State still didn't have much going on.
No, tough season for Mississippi State. They think they might be running out of gas. They were showing some signs of some friskiness earlier, but I think they're running out of gas. Van Buren had a pretty bad day. I think whether it's teams figuring him out, after getting some weeks of film on the guy, or just he's a freshman experiencing growing pains in the SEC against a very good Tennessee defense. They did not look good. Yeah, I don't have a ton of thoughts here. I mean, this game to me seemed like Tennessee got up to a decent lead early and just knew, okay, we can kind of sit on this game and, get out of here with an easy, comfortable win, especially with Nico going down and not returning. So good win for Tennessee as they, prepare for the game in Athens this weekend. And another tough loss in a season filled with tough losses for Mississippi State.
Definitely. They got a lot of work to do in Starkville. I still feel decent about Jeff Lebby and what he's got going on, but it's a full-on rebuilding effort down there. So
yeah. And this game kind of reminded me in the opposite way of the Texas game. We don't have to spend any time on it, but different game, but like Tennessee knew they could win that game without even really like playing a great game or even like bringing much of a game plan, especially when Nico went out. Texas had the same thing, right? DJ Lagway doesn't play. Okay, we got a third year, we got a transfer from Yale. We're not going to lose this game. And they, and it seemed like Florida kind of laid down. It seemed like as soon as Texas got up early, Florida knew, okay, now that we can't run the ball because we have to throw it to catch up with this guy, we don't have a chance. And they kind of tucked their tail and, took their beating and left. So tough weekend for the Gators. When you're on the third string quarterback on the road against a top 5 team in the SEC, there's not much you can do. So,
no, I didn't love what I saw from the Florida defense. I thought the Florida defense would put up a little bit more of a fight in that game. But credit to Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers went off, had 5 touchdowns in that game. He looked really good. I think over 330 yards through the air. So Texas is starting to come into their own, it looks like. Maybe it was eliminating some of the mistakes that we saw earlier in the year. And Florida, if Florida doesn't have BJ Lagway, he's kind of the heart and soul of the team as well. We've heard, since early in the year that DJ Lagway, as soon as he stepped on campus, was a leader, right? And like he's just that kind of kid. So to have him not play, to know the type of player that he is, the talent that he has, and his ceiling and what he can provide, which we saw in the first half of the Georgia game, and we've seen it, in flashes throughout this year. Without him, Florida didn't have a shot. So okay, that's it for week 11. Let's jump in now to our second segment here on the college football playoff rankings and then some SEC title race scenarios. So in the second iteration of the 2024 college football playoff rankings, what were your takeaways?
Not a ton. And I think we can spend a little more time on the SEC title race simply because that will kind of shape the playoff as well in terms of SEC teams that get in. But in terms of just like real quick thoughts, I was surprised that Indiana and BYU both jumped Tennessee. Not disputing really that they should be ranked over them, more so just surprised that they weren't last week, but then were this week. I don't really know what changed there. I know, Indiana beat Michigan, who we know is not good, and BYU kind of was gifted the game at Utah, who's absolutely horrendous. So again, I'm not exactly sure what changed in the committee's eyes for them to jump Tennessee. But again, not like that surprised as both those teams haven't lost. So struggle with the logic there, but understand, ultimately why they are ahead. Georgia falls to 12 from 3. Not a surprise. You get beat that badly on the road, even though it's only their second loss. That makes sense. Ole Miss climbs into the top 12, one spot ahead of Georgia, obviously, right? Because we know the committee. If you've beaten a team, generally speaking, especially recently, you're going to be at least one spot ahead of them. And then Bama moves up a spot and is still the highest rated or ranked two-loss team. Interested to see what happens because there's a lot of teams in the SEC on the back end still, like South Carolina snuck in, Missouri is still clinging to a ranking, and LSU still clinging to a ranking, all of which Alabama has beaten. So obviously Missouri and South Carolina play this weekend. We'll see what LSU does to close the season, but some of those like quality wins, at least in the committee's eyes, for Alabama or other SEC schools could kind of start falling by the wayside. So just something to keep an eye on the backside of because we know the committee likes to do that, right? Where, this team is ranked this high because they have X number of wins against ranked teams. Well, how do we get them X number of wins against ranked teams? We make sure, 20 through 25 include 2 of their wins because who knows 20 to 30 or 20 to 40 in college football, like who knows, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. I mean, to me, I kind of love the fact that Indiana's 10-0. Yeah, they haven't really played anybody. It's the Big Ten. It's really, really top heavy in the Big Ten. But I'm super excited now for that Ohio State game, which I'm not sure if that's this weekend or next weekend.
I believe it's next weekend. Yeah. Week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it sounds right. So I'm super excited for that one. Kurt Signetti. I love all the memes that have come out about him, like the Marlboro cigarette is his head. It's got the Indiana. It's just absurd. But but that one's going to be fun. But no in-depth thoughts other than that. There's a couple interesting things that you mentioned in terms of the second iteration of them. But we can get into the SEC title race, which is really nuts. The first year that we have no divisions, no East, no West. So it's just going to be the top 2 teams. And there are 4, I think there's like 9 potential tiebreakers that the SEC has just in case, it gets to that. But there's 4 that it's probably going to come down to at the end of the day. Like we have all sorts of different scenarios that could happen. And I'll throw these up. I made this graphic earlier. I'll throw these up on the screen here real quick. But these are the scenarios for the top 8 teams currently in the SEC standings. And all of them have a path to the SEC title game. And if you're Tennessee, just win out. If you're A&M, win out. You're in. Texas, win out. And you need Georgia to beat Tennessee. If you're Georgia, you need to beat Tennessee. Then you need a ton of chaos. And you need a ton of chaos, just like Missouri. I mean, you can see Missouri over here on the bottom right. They need to win out. Then they need Texas to win out. Then they need A&M to lose to Auburn. And then they need Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia, and LSU to lose 1 in order to get there. So highly unlikely that Mizzou makes it. It's pretty unlikely as well that Georgia does.
Yeah.
And then you got Bama, who needs to win out. They need Georgia to beat Tennessee. Then they also need, I saw one one path to the title game, that they actually need Missouri to win 2 out of 3 of their remaining games in order to get in. So it is a total cluster as to what this is going to look like in the first year without these divisions, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see, what ends up happening. And if Peter Burns had a tweet about it, is that if all the favored teams win out and then Arkansas beats Missouri, LSU is then in. So if your head's spinning, mine is too. Having read all these today, it was super hard to understand and figure out what needs to happen. But again, if you look here, it's pretty simple for those teams right now at the top. These top 3 teams with Tennessee, A&M, and Texas really just went out. Just went out, baby, and you're in.
Yeah, I wrote earlier this week, or maybe at the end of last week, in the newsletter that I was not going to actually read any of the SEC tiebreaker stuff until I had to, because it's just, there's so much crud in there, frankly. Without divisions, and I don't have a problem with getting rid of divisions, but without divisions, having a conference title game is difficult. And it's no surprise that in the first year, especially without a alpha dog like a Georgia or Alabama or even LSU of years gone by, it's easy to see why it's totally jumbled, because teams have been beaten up on each other and everybody's got a loss. There's no undefeated team in conference. So, and even though, the teams that have one loss, well, they have a lot of tough games remaining. So interested to see how it plays out. Hoping we don't have to really dive deep into tiebreakers other than, head to head, right? If we can keep it to that, then good. If it starts going to conference opponent win percentage or whatever, then that could get a little squirrely. But hopefully if it's head to head, everybody's fine. And, is what it is. You lost on the field. So interested to see how it plays out, though. Very fascinating race, especially because we've seen again in the past in divisions, whether it was an alpha dog on top or sometimes it would kind of be like a wishy-washy, right? Not to pick on Missouri, sorry Missouri fans, but the first couple of years that Missouri and A&M were in the SEC and Missouri was winning the East, it was kind of like, dang, they're going to go and get crushed, right? Or Florida won it a couple of years under Jim McElwain, and you just knew that Bama was going to smash them, which won't be the case this year, right? Because we're going to get 2 really good teams, which is cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just to summarize that again, we'll put the graphic back on the screen one more time. So, Tennessee has Georgia this weekend, huge game. Georgia has Tennessee, huge game. A&M and Texas, both of those teams, really, the big game is at the end of the year. And if both those teams win out, which very possible, I mean, here's A&M's schedule. New Mexico State, they got them this weekend. That's obviously a win. That doesn't matter in the SEC title race anyway. Auburn is bad. It is at Auburn, and A&M historically has had difficulty in.
And it's at night. Sankey's doing his best. Don't think as an Aggie, you don't think I didn't notice that, right? Sankey's sticking us with another night game at Jordan Hare.
Yeah. So, but the simplest scenario is Tennessee wins out. Tennessee beats Georgia this weekend, and then it's up to A&M or Texas, whichever one wins that game. If they win their other games, that you'll get Tennessee versus Texas or Texas A&M. But hey, we're saying A&M is the toughest game for Texas. It definitely is. But this is the SEC, man. You're right at Arkansas. That's not.
Arkansas beat Tennessee. Kentucky beat Ole Miss. I mean, it's possible.
It's quite possible. So we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm not going to put you on the spot to make a prediction right now because I absolutely don't want to make a prediction as to what this is going to end up looking like by the end of the year, because it has been a year of chaos with Kentucky beating Ole Miss and Vanderbilt beating Alabama. Who on earth knows what this is going to look like in 3 weeks? So,
yep.
All All right, that's enough on the SEC title race. Let's get into our Week 12 slate here. First game we got on the docket is one we just touched on, which is Texas versus Arkansas. Texas heads to Fayetteville. I don't know what the spread on this game is. I should have looked that up before we got on. But anyway, I'm sure Texas is a heavy favorite. Probably by
16.5 last I saw. Texas favored. Yeah.
Perfect. So 16.5. So what are you looking at this game? Do you think Arkansas has a chance, or do you think Texas smokes them?
Well, again, as an Aggie fan, I can tell you I wish this game were at night. Texas is getting in early. No, Arkansas has already had like what feels like 4 night games in Fayetteville this year, so I'm not surprised they got stuck with the noon game. But I'm just interested to see here, right? So Arkansas is coming off of a bye. They have been at times quite good and at times really bad. So what worries me about this game is what Ole Miss just did to them, where Jackson Dart threw for 500 yards and Texas is capable of doing that. However, Texas and Quinn Ewers, as we've talked about all season long, have been a little turnover prone, and they're just not that. I mean, I'm interested to see how hyped up that environment is. I think it will be for Texas. Arkansas hates Texas, but Texas, they haven't really been tested on the road, and I'm not even trying to be bitter about it, but like they played Michigan. That was a big game, but I honestly think Arkansas is better than Michigan, probably at least more explosive on offense. An overall better team. You could argue Michigan has a decent defense, I guess, but I think Arkansas is probably better than Michigan. And their only other road game to this point was at Vanderbilt, which again, Vanderbilt's a good team. It's not a very raucous road environment, and they won by 3 points. So I think Arkansas could make this interesting, but similarly to what I think happened last week with Texas and Florida is Arkansas can't get down early. Their secondary has got to play well, and they need to get after Quinn Ewers because that's when he really struggles, right? If he's on schedule and he's making passes downfield on 2nd and 2, 3rd and 1, then Arkansas is in trouble. But if they can stop the Texas run game a little bit, get them in 2nd and 3rd and long, and make Quinn Ewers actually have to make throws downfield with guys coming at him because Arkansas has got a solid defensive line, then I think they can, force them to struggle a little bit. It's just, to me, I honestly think at the end of the first quarter, you're going to know, is Texas going to blow them out and beat them by, 21 plus, or is Arkansas going to make this game interesting and Texas is really going to have to fight just to get out there with a win? Because I just think if Texas starts fast, Arkansas could kind of crumble. But if they get an early turnover or even just, a 3 and out and a sack, get the crowd going, Taylon Green is enough of a wild card that they can have some explosive plays. So that's what I'm kind of looking for here. I think Arkansas, if they're operating at peak efficiency, can really give Texas trouble. I'm just not sure I totally trust them to operate at peak efficiency.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'll just touch on this quickly because we got a couple more games to get to, and we're running up on our hour here. But that was the one thing that I was looking at in this game. You mentioned the Texas being turnover prone, right? There's another team in this game that's super turnover prone. Yeah. That's Arkansas. And Texas actually has, even though they have been turning the ball over on offense, they rank 5th in the SEC in turnover margin. And they forced 20 turnovers this year on defense. That does not bode well for this Arkansas offense, who also turns the ball over a lot. Arkansas has lost 15 turnovers this year. So I'm pretty worried about that for Arkansas. Arkansas they didn't do it against Tennessee, which is why they won, but they've got a proclivity to shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to turnovers. So that's what I'm worried about in this one. Going up against this Texas defense that really forces turnovers. I expect Texas to get a couple turnovers in this one, and I don't know that Arkansas puts up much of a fight, frankly. All right, now let's move on to LSU and Florida. LSU here is a 4.5-point favorite. This is in the Swamp. What are you looking at for the keys in this one?
Does Lagway play? And if he plays, how healthy is he? Can he run? Because in a perfect world for the Florida Gators, he's 100% healthy. And if he's healthy, I think they could win because LSU can't stop a running quarterback at all. And I don't expect them to suddenly learn now. So a fully healthy Lagway, this game is very interesting, and Florida has a very good chance of winning. If he's, only 80%, can't really run, then I don't really know. We've seen Florida defensively, especially like we saw against Texas, like kind of lay down. Nussmeier should be able to take advantage of that as long as he can quit turning the ball over. So I guess, in terms of what I'm looking for, it's basically if you're Florida, I'm looking for Lagway. For LSU, I'm kind of just looking to see if they've got fight left or if because they laid down against Bama. But, that is what it is one game. And I think Kelly has enough control and a stranglehold on that locker room that they're going to come out ready to play. But it's possible that they might kind of be done sitting here at 6-3. So just keep an eye on that, especially the defense. If Lagway plays, and he rips off like 50 yards on a Florida opening drive and they score a touchdown, then I could see, just some heads hanging and Baker sitting over there looking totally lost. But it'll be competitive if Lagway's in. If he's not, then LSU's going to roll.
I agree. It all hinges on Lagway. Lagway keeps Florida competitive. If he's not in the game, we'll see. Napier earlier this week, maybe it was yesterday, might have been even today, on the SEC teleconference coaches call, said that Lagway's improving, that he's been practicing some this week. Didn't necessarily say that he's expected to play, but said that he's been doing better. To me, that sounds like a lot of like what he said last week. And then we didn't see DJ Lagway at all. So I'm a little worried that we're not going to see Lagway in this game.
Yeah.
Next up, we got Mizzou and South Carolina, and then we can finish up with the big game of the weekend, Tennessee and Georgia. So number 23, Mizzou, at number 21, South Carolina. South Carolina is a 13.5-point favorite. That line surprised the heck out of me. I will say that. I mean, I've been saying it all year. I don't think Mizzou's a very good team, but I don't know that South Carolina is 13.5 points better. But I think Vegas is just looking at the last couple of weeks and what we've been seeing out of both of these teams. So what are you looking at here?
Similar to the Florida LSU game, it's quarterback health. Is Brady Cook available? I already apologized to Drew Pine. He proved me wrong against Oklahoma. Very, very, very different circumstances at home versus Oklahoma as it would be on the road in Williams-Brice against this South Carolina defensive line. So no offense to Drew Pine, but I don't think if he's starting that they're going to have much success. Honestly, I don't think even if Brady Cook is starting, especially if he's not healthy. And I'm actually looking at Twitter now. Pete Thamel just tweeted 1 minute ago that Missouri QB Brady Cook is doubtful for the game in South Carolina per the injury report. So it's a big spread, but I really struggle to see how Missouri, again, 2 SEC road games lost by a combined 65 points. I don't see this team going on the road and doing much here. I like, obviously, what we've seen from South Carolina. I think Rocket Sanders can have a big game again. And as long as Lenora Sellers doesn't turn the ball over and they don't do stupid stuff, they should be able to handle Missouri, I think.
Yeah, this one being in Columbia, I think, plays to the Gamecocks' favor. Playing in Willie B is very difficult. I don't know. This is the midday game. Is that correct? I think it's 3:30 game.
Yeah, 3:30, or it might even be the 4:15 SEC. Let me double check. It's 4:15 SEC Network, so it'll be partially at night, 4:15 Eastern. It'll be dark at midway through the second quarter.
Yeah, Willie B will be rocking. Most interesting to me, I want to see if South Carolina can keep this going, and especially on offense. I really think that Texas A&M game was a turning point and kind of like a hinge point for this team and in Lenora Sellers' development. South Carolina fans have been super excited about Lenora Sellers since the minute he stepped on campus, and against Texas A&M, they really finally got to see that blossom, and he played extremely well in both the running game and the passing game. He eluded rushers. He was all over the place, and he really commanded that game. And then you go on the road against Vanderbilt, a very feisty team who's got to win against Alabama this year. They've got to win against Virginia Tech. Like that's a good team. And he played very well again. So I want to see if Lenora Sellers, if that Texas A&M game was really a turning point for him in his development, and see if he can continue on that path here against Missouri, because this would be a big win for them to beat Missouri and keep it going. And like we talked about earlier, potentially get to 9-3, keep that 9-3 in your sights for Shane Beamer and the squad.
Yep.
Okay, let's finish up here with the big one of the weekend, which is number 7 Tennessee going to Sanford Stadium to play Georgia. What are you looking at here? This one's going to be fascinating. There's huge implications for both teams here. Playoffs on the line, SEC title implications. What are you looking at in this game?
I guess I sound like a broken record here, but is Tennessee's quarterback going to play, right? Is Nico healthy? I'll be honest, I don't know much about Tennessee's backup, and I honestly don't even really think that last week was a good indication, because the game, like we said earlier, the game was kind of in hand, so he was not asked to do much. If he's starting in Sanford Stadium, he will obviously be asked to do a lot. And that's kind of what I'm looking for here. So just for the sake of, what to watch for, I guess I'm going to assume that Nico plays in this game. And if he does play, I think this is a game that kind of rests on his shoulders, because for all of Georgia's flaws, especially, offensively, defensively, they still have been good, and they have, for the most part, stopped the run. I don't know how you play Tennessee now at this point from what we've seen from them and don't just sell out on the run. Now, you're going to give up some open guys in the secondary, but Tennessee just haven't been able to hit them, whether it's Nico's a little off or they're dropping them. Like, I think if you're Kirby, you just have to make that call of, like, if we get beat on big shot plays because Nico and the receivers connect really for the first time all year on a consistent basis, then that's how we get beat. But we're not going to let Dylan Sampson beat us. Not in Sanford Stadium. They have got to clamp down on the run and force Nico to beat them. And then, the other side, it's a very similar story, right? Tennessee's defense is awesome, especially up front. I expect them to stop the run, and I expect them to try to make Carson Beck beat them downfield, which he also has not shown that he can do really at all this entire season. So I think it just kind of comes down to quarterback play, right? Who takes care of the football, A, but then B, makes a couple more plays downfield. Georgia going back home, I think will help them. The two games that they lost this year obviously were on the road, so it's nice for them to get a big game at home, but I just think it comes down to quarterback play in this one. How about you?
Quarterback play matters every single game in this conference. Quarterback is the most important position on the field. Doesn't matter what conference you're in, but it matters especially in this conference when the margin of victory, can be so slim. So I'm with you on the quarterback play. We've been talking about it all year with Tennessee. This is the best defense that Josh Heupel has had in his time at Tennessee. This is the second best defense in the SEC right now. They average 8 tackles a loss per game. They average about 3 sacks a game. And they also are +4 in turnover margin. I'm looking at that, and that makes me worried for Georgia because they have had issues all year turning the ball over. And they also have had issues just with teams getting in their backfield. And when they do that, Carson Beck turns the ball over. So I think that really plays into Tennessee's favor here. It is nice that it's in Sanford Stadium for Georgia. But I'm a little on edge here for Georgia. I think that Tennessee really has a good chance to win this game. The difficulty becomes is that offense just hasn't been humming, right? So you touched on it. you see this Tennessee defense, and if I'm looking at this game, just typically, I'm thinking, okay, Tennessee has a pretty good advantage on defense based on those metrics that I just talked about. Now, you flip it on offense, you're like, okay, does Tennessee have a much better offense than Georgia? No, they don't. They don't have a much better offense than Georgia. So it's not just absolutely, give this one to Tennessee. Tennessee's a better team. They're not, because that offense should be clicking by this point in the year, but it just isn't. I thought that they would. Last week I picked them to cover against Mississippi State. They didn't do it. They looked good against Mississippi State. They got a comfortable, good win, but they didn't cover. They can't cover. They haven't been covering spreads almost all year, except for early in the season when they're playing like Toledo, or whoever it was that they blew out. But I'm fascinated to see how this one turns out. But that's what I'm watching in this one is Georgia on offense. Can they get anything going against this Tennessee defense, which is one of the best in the country?
Totally agree. I'm going to throw this out here. It's not a prediction because I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just going to throw it out there as a wouldn't it be hilarious if, and then if it does happen, I'll certainly take credit for it next week. But this could be like a 9-6 2011 LSU Bama game because these offenses can't score. Now, what makes me think that won't happen is just the turnovers, like we talked about, especially on the Georgia side, right? There's a fairly good chance that Tennessee's offense is set up in some pretty advantageous situations, which, does not lend itself well to a field goal battle, 9-6 field position style game. But both of these defenses are that good. They're that capable. And both of these offenses have been inconsistent enough this season to where a 9-6 game is not out of the realm of possibility. And I, for one, would love that. That would be awesome if we could get back to something like that in the SEC. So keep an eye out for that.
That's some old school SEC smash mouth football right there.
Yep.
It's going to be 58 degrees at game time. So it's going to be a beautiful fall evening in Athens. So going to be a lot of fun to watch that one. All right. So that is it for week 12. This week, we've got our two segments that we talk about each week that we end the show with. We got our Must Champ Coach of the Week, and then we feature our Biscuit of the Week. So first off, we got the Must Champ Coach of the Week. So our Must Champ Coach of the Week this week was we had a couple serious possibilities for this one this week. We had Brian Kelly. Who was the other one we were looking at? It was
I'll introduce our candidates that are on the medal stand, maybe a bronze and silver, and I'll turn it over to you for the gold medal winner today. So the two other candidates we consider this week was yes, Brian Kelly for crying to the refs about Alabama blitzing 8 guys and just, I don't know, keeping his starters in when you're down 42-6. He was just doing a lot of Brian Kelly stuff, frankly. So shout out to him.
But we love his passion.
Yeah, right. Shout out to him for those antics. Yeah. And then, of course, Eli Drinkwitz, who's sort of a mainstay in this Must Champ Coach of the Week award. He seems like he's always hovering around the periphery and or winning it each week. But, his post-game interview with Kubelik was hilarious, saying they're still in the playoff race. He then went on Twitter after the game and was quote tweeting, I think it was some sort of like a Missouri either media member or somebody that had a fair amount of followers and was like either a Mizzou fan account or actually covered the team. But Drinkwitz, tweeted at him or quote tweeted him after the game. I'm pulling it up right now just to see because it's quite funny. So the fan is calling for Drinkwitz, Kirby Moore, everybody to be fired because, you can't look like this against a terrible team like Oklahoma after a bye week. Of course, Missouri goes on to win the game, and Drinkwitz pulls up the receipts and says, maybe just stop tweeting during the game. You got no clue to this guy. So just, again, Drinkwitz is entertaining. I love him. Shout out to him. But there was one coach who embodied the spirit of Will Muschamp even more this week. So who won it?
Yes, there was. So if you're new to the show, we're not making fun of Will Muschamp. We love Will Muschamp, and it's all about his passion for the game. He's punching whiteboards. He's all over the sideline. He's headbutting players. He's got blood running down his face. We love the energy of Will Muschamp. We love all of that. So that's where the Muschamp Coach of the Week comes from. So a coach that embodied that this week that gets the gold medal is Shane Beamer at a previous stop of Will Muschamp, South Carolina, the man who took over for Will Muschamp after he was let go in Columbia, Shane Beamer. So let's just watch this clip real quick, and then I'll talk about it afterwards.
That's the mark of a really good team, which we are. The people that do the rankings don't think we're worth a crap, and that's fine. Keep crapping on us. That's the way we like it as well. Don't rank us this week. We're good where we are. We just like to just lay low and work really, really hard and come out and have fun on Saturdays as well. I promised Sir Big Spur I would do this. I'm disappointed that Sir Big Spur is not here. I think it's ridiculous that this is the only place apparently in the SEC that doesn't allow live mascots in the stadium, and that's what makes this league special, is the fact that LSU can have a freaking tiger at their stadium tonight, but we can't bring Sir Big Spur. So Sir Big Spur came over and gave us a send-off before we left the facility yesterday, and I told him I would say hello to Sir Big Spur in the press conference, so we miss you guys. Come on, Vandy, do better.
Do better.
Do better, Vandy. Why can't we have Sir Big Spur on the sidelines? So I absolutely love this from Shane Beamer. First of all, the fact that he is complaining about not being ranked, but then also going back and saying, actually, you know what? Screw all you guys. Don't rank us. We don't like being ranked. We like being the underdog, flying under the radar. Like, screw all you guys. It puts a chip on our shoulder, and we'll come into your place. You can come into our place. Whatever, doesn't matter. We'll meet you where you are, and we'll kick your tail anyway. And for those who aren't aware, those who aren't South Carolina fans, Sir Big Spur is the cock, the Gamecock that is the live mascot for the Gamecocks. And this is, as you can see, you got Shane Beamer kind of checking in there to make sure you're looking at Sir Big Spur. Sir Big Spur, this is the send-off that he gave that Coach Beamer was talking about there in that press conference. So congratulations to Shane Beamer on winning the Muschamp Coach of the Week award for Week 11. We love the energy, Coach. Good stuff.
Yeah, this phenomenal quote in the or clip of that press conference. No notes, like you said. He's calling out the people ranking them, saying, keep crapping on us. Like, we love when we're getting crapped on by people ranking us. You know, just that quintessential, like, underdog mentality. Nobody respects us, which is awesome. And I loved it. And then, yeah, giving his mascot a shout out, Sir Big Spur can't make the trip to Vandy. So do better, Vandy.
My favorite part of that was the fact that he looks up at the reporter who he's talking to and doesn't break. He doesn't laugh. This isn't funny. The fact that Vandy did not allow Sir Big Spur to come into the stadium is absolutely egregious, and Shane Beamer is seriously offended by it, and he's not laughing about this. Do better, Vandy.
Be better. And I know he's, you know, this isn't anything new, like you said, for South Carolina fans. I mean, but just the fact that his name is Sir Big Spur and Shane Beamer's in a press conference addressing him as Sir Big Spur, it's awesome. I mean, you got a guy who's, I don't know what he makes, 6, 7, 8 million, right? Coaching SEC football. And he's in his press conference talking about how egregious it is that Sir Big Spur can't come on their road trips to Vanderbilt.
That is SEC football at its finest. Just total absurdity. Just an absolute blast.
Yeah,
so,
that's why we love it.
That's right. Just chaos and craziness every single week. So, all right. Our final segment here is our Biscuit of the Week. So if you got a submission every single week, we feature a biscuit on the show. We're Biscuits SEC, and that's because we love SEC football. We love SEC athletics. But we also named it Biscuits and SEC because we love Southern culture. We love Southern cuisine. Biscuits and gravy, country fried biscuits, chicken biscuits, sausage and egg biscuits, all of it. We love all that stuff. We love Waffle House. We love it all. So if you guys do have a submission, we would love to see it from your local diner, whether it's homemade. Hammer made us some homemade biscuits a couple weeks ago that were fantastic, some drop biscuits. So we love to feature one each week. So if you got a submission, you can tag us at Biscuits and SEC on social media, or you can send it to us, contact@biscuitsandsec.com. But this week, we had last week was our submission. You can see it here. This was from Emily of East Texas, a Twitter friend of ours. She's an Aggie, and these were her homemade biscuits with her grandmother's blackberry jelly. And then this week, our biscuit of the week comes from Hey Jay Wolf, who responded after he saw Emily of East Texas's tweet and the fact that she was going to be featured on the show. And this is him out at his deer camp. He's actually a Red Raider fan. He's a Big 12 fan in Big 12 country.
Guns up.
But, yeah, guns up. But that is a beautiful set of biscuits there that he cooked over the fire. So shout out to Hey Jay Wolf, and also fantastic profile picture. Absolutely bodacious right there. So Hey Jay Wolf, thank you for the submission. We appreciate it. Those look fantastic. Wish I could have one of those right now. So that should do it for us this week. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We had over 150 folks watching us tonight, so we really appreciate everybody tuning in. We will be back next week. We're here every Wednesday at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter. That's the Morning Biscuits newsletter. I write it on Monday. Hammer has it on Fridays. And everything you want to know about the SEC, we've got the injury reports, we've got the storylines from the previous week, and any recruiting news and notes, basketball, since it's basketball season now. So be sure to subscribe to that. It's free. Comes to your inbox every Monday and Friday. And then be sure to go follow us at Biscuits and SEC on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to grow that right now. And you can click the notification bell as well so that you don't miss it when we go live every Wednesday evening during the season. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you guys here in about 20 minutes on SEC After Dark, where we will make our picks for the week. We'll join the whole crew from Stephen Willis to the rest of the crew, and we're looking forward to it. So join us then in about 20 minutes. For Hammer, I am Alex. As you can see, I messed my name up tonight, but Bossman. For Hammer, I'm Bossman, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks again.
Yep. Appreciate y'all. Jay Wolf, hope you tagged out.